Welcome back to Leeds Lately. Today's video is going to be a bit different from usual, and we're going to do a tier list where we're going to rank the current Leeds United squad. The things that we're going to consider when we're ranking these players are their potential to get better, their current ability level, and whether we see them having a really positive future at the club. So we've got 5 categories today. At the bottom, we've got needs to go, any players that we just think they're just not good enough already. Then we've got is he good enough, where it's going to be those players that are a bit borderline that we're going to say, well, to be honest, they can be good, but are they good enough for us to progress onto the next level? Top 10 in the Premier League, self-explanatory, the type of players that you would see for one of those steady top 10 teams that you think will do that every year. Then we've got Europa League, so those sorts of players that you would consider that they would be comfortable in Europe, even in the future or today. And then you've got the real elite, which is the Champions League, where we're going to look at if we've got any players that we think they could put it in the Champions League easily. So the first player we're going to look at is Rodrigo, who obviously we signed in the summer from Valencia. And Rodrigo is actually a regular Champions League player before he came to us. Obviously, the only reason that he actually came to us was because Valencia were in a lot of financial troubles. So Rodrigo is going to go straight in Champions League. Tyler Roberts. There's been a lot of talk about Tyler Roberts recently. Asking that question of is he good enough? And I think that sums it up, to be honest. I think he can be good and he's got the potential to be brilliant, and I'd love to be proved wrong. But at the moment, when we're looking at him, it's an is he good enough for me, because he's not terrible, so he doesn't need to go, but he's one of those players where Marcelo Bielsa said to him, you don't want to only get in the team because of injuries, you've got to prove to me that you're good enough to be in this team without other injuries. So that's where we're going to put Roberts. Patrick Bamford. Patrick Bamford's been fantastic this season. But I think it remains to be seen whether he can keep this up. I really do rate him, and I think that he's one of those players where he could just keep pushing on with Bielsa. But if Bielsa leaves, does he have the same impact on the team? I don't know if he does, but I think, considering he scored 13 goals for us this season, let's just base it off this Premier League season. And to be honest, 13 goals in the Premier League season at this point, where he's like joint 3rd top scorer as of maybe last week, I haven't checked since. I think he's got to go in Europa League, to be honest. I think he could, that like some of the teams that you would play in the Europa League wouldn't necessarily be as good as lower teams in the Premier League, just because of the standard of the league that they're from. So I'm going to put him in Europa League. Jamie Shackleton. Jamie Shackleton is one of those players where he's got great potential, but it's so hard to tell if he's ever going to reach it. Bielsa really rates him, obviously, because he uses him as a backup player, and he's quite a portable player, if you will. He's multi-positional. I think his best position is in midfield, where he can drive forward with that pace that he's got. He is very small, but then that's not stopped some of the other best players in the world. So Shaq's, given his future potential, I think he's not one of those players who you expect to be in the first team, but he's a very serviceable substitute. So I think if he can elevate himself from that status to making himself undroppable, then yeah. So, but at the moment, I think I'm going to put him in. I think it would be unfair actually to put him on a different level than Roberts. If we're rating him on what he currently is, we said about Roberts that he's also got potential. So I think it's only fair to put them both in is he good enough, because I think they can be. Matthias Klick, for this season, well, early on in the season he was actually very good. He's had a little bit of a drop off in form, but I think he is still a very good player. He's getting on a little bit now, but considering where we actually are in the league, he doesn't look out of his depth, basically. So I think he's going to go top 10, because I don't think he's going to be around anymore when we even get to the Europa League. Not saying that Rodrigo will be, but you've seen tier lists before. Sometimes a reason for one is actually a reason not to for another. Calvin Phillips, Champions League. No, Calvin Phillips, he's so good in that holding midfield role that he makes this team tick, and I think he could do no matter what players were around him. I think he's just that kind of player. I don't think he looked out of his depth when he dropped into the England team, and I think he can stay all the way. I mean, he's 25 now, so he's got, what, 7-8 more years at the club if he decides to stay. So, yeah, I think he's definitely good enough for that. Jackie Haradonna, as Moscow White, Daniel Chapman would call him. He's had a little bit of a drop-off recently, but I think he is a very good player, and I can definitely see him tearing down the wing in a Europa League game. I think he's good enough. I think he's not that old, so I think there's still a few little things that he needs to sort out in his game, but I think he's good enough to play Europa League, so that's where I'm going to put him. That's now. I will put him there now. Pablo Hernandez. He's going at the end of the season, isn't he? Let's be honest. We think he's going to go, so in his prime, he was Champions League. It's a tough one, really. I think considering where we are at the moment and his legs have gone, I think he's still top 10, because... Or is he though? Because we haven't actually seen him do anything that impressive this season. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's top 10. Helder Costa. It's a straight, is he good enough for me? That sums it up. That sums Costa up brilliantly. Is he good enough? I just don't know. I think sometimes he can be really good and sometimes he's not, but I just don't think he's consistent enough for a top 10 team, so he's going in, is he good enough? Jan Poveda, he's one with great potential, and from what I've seen so far, I think he's good enough. I think he's good enough for top 10. I think he's a good bench player because he adds that little bit of... He adds a bit of a different dynamic when he comes on, to be honest. It's his tricky feet that confuse players, and I think... Where to put him though? I think he's good enough, so I'm going to put him in... I'm going to put him in top 10 for now, but he could easily push on to that next level and be a Europa League standard player. Adam Forshaw. We simply haven't seen enough of him. It's one of them. I think, actually, considering how long he's been out with injury, what we're going to do is put him in, is he good enough? Because after coming back from this injury, it's simply, we don't know, is he actually good enough? Leif Davis, he's one of them. It's the same as Shackleton, Roberts. It's an is he good enough for me because he's only played a few games, and I would like to know, is he actually good enough? I think he could be, from little bits that I've seen of him, and he's good in the 23s, but can he make that step up to the first team? So that's a wait and see, I think, on that one. Rafinha, he was set to play Champions League, wasn't he, right before he moved to Leeds, and from what we've seen from him, definitely a Champions League worthy player, and I think that nobody would have any qualms with putting him in there. Saw actually before that apparently Man United have made proper inquiries about him, but that'll be a swift NO from the guys at Leeds. Robin Koch, I think he's got the potential, hasn't he? And he is already good. He's got a few mistakes in him, but I think he's better than top 10. So I'm going to put him in that Europa League category. Pascal Struijk, he is top 10. I think at the moment he's already growing into a better player. This is as a centre back, because if you've gone on Leeds Lately recently, you'll see that my most recent blog was about the fact that we haven't got a backup for Calvin, and I compared Struijk to Calvin in that position, and Struijk just isn't good enough in that position. As a centre-back, I rate him very, very highly, and I think obviously he's very young as well. I think he's 20, so he's got great potential for the future, so top 10 for now, but he could easily push on higher than that. Stewie Dallas, I think he's got to go in Europa League, you know. I mean, he's a very good all-rounder, but it's not like jack of all trades, master of none. He's actually like one of the best players every position that you put him in. You can't fault him, so I think Europa League, because it's so handy to have a player like that in your club. It's like James Milner for Liverpool. He was playing Champions League, well, he is playing Champions League football, And he's still that utility player, so he's played at right back, centre midfield, holding midfield, anywhere that they want to play him, he's there for that, and I think that is actually invaluable. Gianni Alioski. Now, I love Gianni Alioski, and I think all Leeds fans do, but if we're really being honest with ourselves here, I think he needs to go because he needs to make space for somebody else to come in the summer, because I just don't think he's good enough. He's a great person to have around the club. He's very energetic, he's very lively, he always brings a smile to everybody's face, but that's not enough to push on to that next level. And I think the amount of mistakes that he has in him, it's just not really good enough for what we want to do in the future. So unfortunately, it pains me to do it, but I'm going to put Alioski needs to go. Liam Cooper. Now, I maybe would have thought that he might have struggled this season, and that he might be is he good enough? But to be honest, I think he's top 10 now. From what we've seen of him this season, especially in the last few games, he's been brilliant. Like some of the blocks that he's putting his body on the line. I can't fault Coops, and I think he's deserving of that top 10 spot. Luke Ayling or Bill, I think he is good enough for top 10. I don't know if he's better than that. I think some of the runs he makes, do you know what, I'm going to put him in Europa League. I think he adds so much to this team, and I think you'd have a hard time replacing him and putting anybody else in that role, and for them to have the same effect on the attacking phases. So I think I'm going to put him in Europa League. I think he's deserved it on his merit of the last 3 seasons. Now, Kiko Casilla, it's as simple as he needs to go. He's on quite high wages considering the rest of the squad, other than maybe the new signings and a couple of others like Bamford and Phillips. So he needs to get off the books, because as a 30-odd-year-old keeper, when you've got a 20-year-old keeper, or 21 now, he turned 21 the other day, Melier. When you've got him starting, he's not really going to be featured, is he, Kiko? And to be paying that much money for him is a bit ridiculous, and you've got to get him off the books. And he's not great with the fans either, so he's got to go. Ilian Melier. If we're going to rate him purely on his potential, from what I've seen of him, let's say that we get into the Europa League in 3 years' time when he's 24, then I think he's Europa League. I think he's good enough to play there once he's had a little bit more Premier League experience. And finally, Diego Llorente. Now, Diego Llorente, I sort of thought that he wouldn't be that brilliant coming from Sociedad at the age of 28, 29 or whatever he is. I think he's in his late 20s. I thought that he wouldn't be that fantastic for them to let him go for £17 million, and it was a bit of a under the radar signing really. But even though we lost against Villa the other day, the way he just completely bossed Watkins was absolutely class, and I thought, like, if he can do that against some of those top strong strikers like Watkins, then like who can't he do it against realistically? He had pace to get back, he could get in behind them, and he could get his body in the way and just hold players off. And I think I'm going to put him in Europa League. I think he's that good. One player that's not actually on this list is Berardi, because we didn't really know about when he'd be making his comeback, but he actually played a few 23s games the other day. So if I was to rate him, if I was to put him in a category in here, I love Berardi, but I think it's going to be is he good enough? I think he would be okay, comfortable in maybe getting Leeds to into a bottom half finish. But as a top 10 player, I don't think you see any other players of that standard at top 10 clubs. So yeah, unfortunately I'd have to put him in is he good enough? Now there may be some players that I've missed in this, so let me know in the comments and I'll reply where I would have put them. Or alternatively, comment down below if you think I've got anything wrong. Obviously this is just my opinion, and my opinion might even change tomorrow, so it's hard to do this without, well, to be honest, it's impossible to do this and somebody totally agree with you. So comment down below on any that you would like to change, and follow me on Twitter if you're new, subscribe for more, and I'll see you after the West Ham game. Thanks for watching.